Welcome to this emotional documentary style story. This is the story of a poor American girl who believed she had found love, safety, and a better life. She trusted a rich man, married him, and gave him her whole heart. But when life gave them a baby girl instead of the son he wanted, he showed his true face and left her in her darkest time. He thought wealth made him powerful and that he could walk away without consequence. But life has its own way of teaching lessons. In the end, the same man who once stood above others came painfully close to losing everything, while the woman he rejected rose stronger than he ever imagined. This story carries love, betrayal, pain, justice, motherhood, and a lesson worth remembering. A girl with a small life and a big heart. In a quiet part of North Carolina, a young woman named Maren Cole lived in a simple life. Maren was 23 years old. She worked at a small flower shop on weekdays and helped an elderly neighbor with groceries on weekends to earn a little extra money. She rented a modest room above a bakery owned by a kind older couple who treated her like family. Her life was not easy, but it was honest. She counted every dollar carefully. She reused old jars as vases. She saved ribbon from flower deliveries because she hated waste. She had no luxury, no powerful name, and no one waiting to open grand doors for her. But she had something many wealthy people did not. She had a clean heart. Maren believed in effort, respect, and quick love. She dreamed of one day owning a little flower and gift store with a reading corner near the window. She loved soft music, rainy mornings, and handwritten notes. She had grown up poor, but her late mother had always taught her one thing: being a poor is not shameful, being a cruel is. Maren carried those words with her through every season of life. She had seen enough hardship to know that money mattered. It paid rent, bought medicine, and kept the lights on, but she never believed money made a person good. She had met poor people with golden hearts and comfortable people with empty souls. Still, there was one part of life she secretly longed for. She wanted to be loved deeply by someone who saw her value even without wealth. She wanted a home that felt safe. She wanted a family built on kindness. That dream made her vulnerable to the wrong kind of man. The rich man who chose her. On a cool spring afternoon, Maren was arranging roses and white lilies in the front display when a dark luxury car stopped outside the flower shop. A man stepped out wearing an expensive coat, polished shoes, and the calm confidence of someone used to being respected the moment he entered the room. His name was Trenton Vale. He came from one of the wealthiest families in the region. His father owned private land, commercial buildings, and several development firms. Trenton had grown up in a world of private schools, business, dinners, and family pressure. He was handsome, well-spoken, and skilled at saying the right thing in the right tone. He entered the flower shop and looked around briefly before approaching the counter. "I need an arrangement for a charity dinner," he said. Maren smiled politely. "What kind of feeling do you want it to have?" He looked slightly amused. "Feeling, yes," she said. "Flowers say different things." That answer caught his attention. Most people in his world did not speak like that. They spoke of prince, scale, status, and impact. But Maren spoke as if beauty meant something. He asked her what flowers she would choose for elegance without coldness. She answered without hesitation: cream roses, soft greenery for warmth. He watched her build the arrangement with thoughtful hands and quick focus. She did not try to impress him. In fact, she barely looked at his watch, his car keys, or the tailored coat that made his wealth obvious. For Trenton, that felt refreshing. He came back 3 days later with another excuse. Then again, soon those flower orders turned into longer conversations. He asked about her life. She told him simple truths. He asked what she wanted in the future. She admitted her small dream of opening her own shop. He laughed softly and said, "That does not sound small at all." Maren slowly opened her heart. Trenton told her he was tired of shallow women who only wanted status. He said he wanted someone sincere. someone grounded, someone who cared about real things. Maren believed in him because she wanted to believe that a man from a high world could still see truth. He began taking her to dinners, mountain drives, and beautiful places she had never imagined visiting. He listened when she spoke. He sent books to the flower shop with notes tucked inside. He stood close enough to make her feel protected but not pressured. Everything seemed gentle. Everything seemed serious. And when he told her he loved her, Maren's heart gave in completely. A marriage built on unequal truth. The wedding happened faster than some people expected. Trenton said he did not want to wait because life was uncertain and love should not be delayed. Maren, who had spent years feeling unseen by the world, felt deeply chosen. She thought she had found the man who looked beyond class, beyond money, and beyond social difference. Trenton's family, however, did not fully welcome her. His mother, Lucinda Whale, smiled in public but never truly accepted Maren. She thought Maren was too simple, too poor, and too ordinary for the Whale name. His father, Brannon Whale, stayed mostly natural, but his silence was not support, it was distance. At family dinners, Maren often felt gently inspected. How she held a glass, how she pronounced certain words, how she reacted to talk about land purchases and business expansions. Trenton always defended her just enough to look loyal, but never enough to comfort the deeper arrogance in the room. That was one of the first warnings Maren should have understood. He loved her when love looked beautiful, but he did not fight for her when respect cost him comfort. Still, early marriage brought many sweet days. They moved into a large house outside the city with big windows, trimmed hedges, and warm fireplaces. Maren filled the kitchen with fresh flowers. She made the cold rooms feel softer. She learned which tea Trenton liked after long meetings and which chair he preferred near the study window. She tried her best to be a good wife, and in many ways she was. Months later, when she discovered she was pregnant, she carried with happiness. She cried with happiness. She imagined a peaceful nursery, tiny hands, soft blankets, and Trenton smiling at their child. She believed the baby would bring them even closer. She thought this new life would turn their house into a real home. When she told Trenton the news, he smiled and kissed her forehead. He even lifted her gently and said, "This changes everything." At the time she thought he meant joy, but she later learned he meant expectations. The son he wanted. As Maren's pregnancy progressed, something in Trenton began to change. At first it was sober. He started speaking often about legacy, family name, and the future of the Whale line. He mentioned teaching a boy to ride horses, walk the land, and take over responsibilities one day. He talked about my son in a way that sounded less like hope and more like certainty. Maren noticed it, but she brushed it aside. One evening, while folding baby clothes, she smiled and said, "What if it is a girl?" Trenton gave a small, dismissive laugh. "The first one should be a boy." Maren looked at him carefully. "Should?" He shrugged. "It just makes things simpler." She tried to keep the moment light. "A healthy baby is what matters." He kissed her cheek and said, "Of course." But there was something off in his tone. As the months passed, Lucinda Whale made comments that unsettled Maren more openly. A son strengthens a family. The first child carries importance. Some women are lucky enough to enter a powerful house and produce the right heir. Maren left. Maren felt uneasy each time, but she told herself old-fashioned rich families simply spoke strategically. Deep down, however, she was beginning to understand a painful truth. They were not waiting for a baby, they were waiting for a boy, and in that waiting, Maren's value was being tied to something she could never control. The day everything broke, Maren gave birth on a cold November morning. The labor was long, painful, and exhausting. For hours, she fought through fear and physical weakness with one thought in her heart: "Please let my baby be safe." When the child finally arrived, The doctor smiled warmly and said, "You have a beautiful little girl." Maron cried at once, not from disappointment, from love. The nurse placed the baby in her arms and the whole room changed. Tiny pink cheeks, a trembling mouth, a little hand curling near her chest. Mara looked down and felt something more powerful than every dream she had ever carried. She named her Elovan Grace. To her, the baby was perfect. She looked up, expecting to see Trenton softened by the same miracle. Instead, she saw silence. He stood near the window with a face that had gone still in the worst way. The doctor continued speaking gently, but Maron barely heard anything after that. She kept looking at Trenton, waiting for him to come closer, waiting for joy to break across his face, waiting for him to kiss his daughter's forehead. He did not. Hours later, after family members were informed, Lucinda arrived at the hospital with flowers too formal to feel loving. She looked at the baby, gave a thin smile and said, "She's healthy, that's matter." But her eyes did not match her words. By evening, Trenton had become cold. He did not argue, he did not shout, he simply withdrew. And somehow that felt even worse. He spent less time in the room, his answers became short. When Maron asked if he was alright, he said he was tired. The next morning, while Elovan slept in the clear bassinet, Maron asked softly, "You're not happy?" Trenton took too long to answer. Then he said the sentence that would wound her forever, "I thought this child would be a son." Maron stared at him. "She's our daughter," she said quickly. He looked away. "You do not understand what this means for my family." In that moment, Maron felt something break that sleep, medicine, and tears could not repair. This was not confusion, this was rejection. And it was not only directed at the baby, it was directed at her too. The man who walked away the weeks after Elovan's birth were full of loneliness. Maron came home from the hospital, hopeful that Trenton's distance might fade once he spent time with the baby. She told herself maybe he was shocked, maybe family pressure had confused him, maybe fatherhood would soften him, but it did not. He rarely held Elovan. He avoided family photos. He spent more time at work, more nights away, and more hours behind the locked study door. When guests visited, he behaved respectfully enough to keep appearances clean, but in private he had become emotionally upset. Maron fed the baby alone in quiet rooms. She walked the floors at night alone when Elovan cried. She sat beside the nursery window, feeling more like a tolerated guest than a wife in her own home. Then one evening, after a tense dinner at the Whale Estate where Lucinda barely looked at the child, Trenton finally said what he had been carrying, "This marriage is not what I expected." Maron stood in the nursery doorway with Elovan in her arms because the baby is a girl. He gave a frustrated breath. "Do not reduce it like that. How else should I describe it?" He turned away, then back again. "I need a different kind of future than the one this is becoming." Maron could hardly believe what she was hearing. "This is your daughter." His jaw tightened. "I need a son to carry the line properly." Her whole body went cold. She had heard cruel things before in life. She had seen hard people and proud people, but never had she imagined the man who married her in the name of love would speak of his own child like a failure. "You're leaving us," she whispered. He did not answer directly. That was answer enough. Within 2 weeks, legal papers arrived. Not divorce at first, separation. Temporary financial arrangements, a carefully polished explanation prepared by his legal team that suggested personal incompatibility after the emotional strain of childbirth. Maron read the papers while Elovan slept in the cradle nearby. She had no father beside her, no wealthy family shielding her, only a broken heart and a tiny daughter who needed her. Trenton moved out fully before Christmas, and just like that, the rich man who promised her love left his wife and child because his life had given him a daughter instead of the son he demanded. Falling into hard days, after the separation, Maron's life changed brutally. The house belonged to the Whale Family Trust, so she could not stay long term. The financial support Trenton offered was cold, limited, and carefully structured to avoid scandal while keeping control. It was enough to survive barely, but not enough to rebuild comfortably. Maron moved into a small rental duplex on the edge of a town with used furniture, one narrow bedroom, and a kitchen that rattled when the winter wind hit the windows. It was nothing like the elegant house she had left, but unlike that house, this place had something honest. Her daughters breathed her own effort, silence free from judgment, still survival was hard. Alone work often at night. Maron was exhausted. Money was tight. She sold 2 wedding gifts and 1 small gold bracelet to pay overdue bills. She walked to the grocery store with the baby wrapped close against her chest because she wanted to save gas. She cried sometimes while washing bottles, not because she regretted her daughter, but because pain and fear had become daily companions. Yet through all of it, she loved Eloman more every week. The little girl had calm gray blue eyes and a sweet expression that seemed older than her months. When she smiled for the first time, Maron laughed and cried at once. That one tiny smile gave her strength she did not know she still had. Meanwhile, Trenton's world looked untouched from the outside. He continued attending business dinners, horse events, and investor meetings. He was seen with his parents at public gatherings. He moved through wealthy circles as if his abandoned wife and daughter were only a private inconvenience. People whispered, but money often protects men from direct judgment, at least for a while. The women who refuse to stay broken. Pain can destroy a person, or it can sharpen them into someone stronger. For Maron, the turning point came one rainy afternoon when Eloman was 6 months old. The baby had a fever, bills were stacked on the counter, and the landlord had warned of an upcoming rent increase. Maron sat on the kitchen floor feeling completely overwhelmed. Then Eloman, still tired and warm, reached out from her blanket and touched Maron's hand. Such a small moment, but it felt like a call. Maron looked at her daughter and understood something clearly. No one was coming to save them. That did not mean they were lost. It means she had to rise. The next morning, she asked the bakery owners downstairs from her old rented room if they still needed help with flower displays and gift wrapping during weekends. Then she contacted 2 local event planners she once met while delivering floral pieces during her marriage life. She offered affordable event floral design, table styling, and handsome and handmade welcoming arrangements for small weddings, showers, and local business opening. At first, the jobs were tiny: a church baby shower, a bookstore opening, a retirement lunch. But Maron gave each project elegance, care, and emotional warmth. People noticed she was not just arranging flowers, she was creating feeling. She named her small side business Grace Petal Studio, using her daughter's middle name as its heart. She worked while Eloman napped. She tied ribbon at midnight. She sketched table layouts with one hand while rocking the crib with the other. She borrowed, reused, learned, and improved constantly. Little by little, the work grew, and little by little, the frightened, abundant wife became a working mother with a vision. The life that turned against Trenton. While Maron was rebuilding from almost nothing, Trenton's life had begun shifting in ways he did not expect. He still had money, yes, but money cannot protect a man forever when his character is weak. The first crack came through family business pressure. A major land deal Trenton pushed aggressively began failing after unexpected legal complications. Then two investors quickly pulled back from a separate hospitality project because they did not trust his judgment. His father, Brandon, who had once assumed Trenton would easily continue the family line and business image, began losing confidence in him. At the same time, whispers about the separation spread through private social circles more sharply than the Vale family anticipated. People did not always say it openly, but many knew the basic truth. A young wife had been left after giving birth to a daughter. In some circles, the story sounded old-fashioned. In others, it sounded cruel. In both, it damaged respect. Lucinda tried to control the narrative, but she could not fully stop it. Then came more serious problems. One energy investment Trenton entered through pride instead of care collapsed badly. He had borrowed influence against future expectations. When the project failed, it hit him harder than anyone knew. Debt deepened, family patience thinned, a private lender demanded faster restructuring. A luxury property planned under his personal name had to be sold. He still looked rich to ordinary people, but close up his world was weakening. And with this every loss, the man who once discarded his wife and daughter became more bitter, more restless, and more alone. That was how life began answering him, not all at once, but steadily. Maron Rice's hired 3 years passed. Elovan grew into a bright, gentle little girl with dark curls and thoughtful eyes. She loved flowers, pictures, books, and sitting near the window when rain touched the glass. She often asked her mother innocent questions about petals, colors, and names of trees. Maron adored her, and Grace Petal's studio was no longer smaller. What began as weekend floral work had become a respected design business for intimate events, boutiques, launches, elegant private dinners, and even hotel lobbies. Maron had a gift for turning modest spaces into places that felt meaningful. She did not have the cold perfection of luxury brands. She had warmth. Clients trusted her because she listened deeply and designed with feeling. Soon she rented a proper studio, then hired one assistant, then two. Her work was featured in a regional magazine under the headline, "From Struggle to Style." The mother behind Grace Petal's studio, Maron never used bitterness as her brand. She used beauty that made her rise even stronger. Meanwhile, Trenton's financial position worsened because of bad deals, damaged trust, and family conflict. He no longer stood where he once had. He was still dressed well and still carried the old family name, but much of what once made him look powerful was shrinking. Even his father had started moving responsibilities away from him toward a more disciplined younger cousin. For a man like Trenton, that was humiliation. He began drinking more, he attending farewell events, and for the first time in his life, he felt what it meant to lose status. Life was bringing him painfully close to the kind of ordinary hardship he once looked down on. The day he saw her again, Maron and Trenton had little direct contact beyond legal updates and occasional formal arrangements. He had rarely visited alone. When he did, he appeared stiff and uncertain, as if fatherhood to a daughter still remained something he had never truly expected. Then one autumn evening, everything shifted. Maron had been hired to design florals and interior styling for a high-profile charity gala at an old historic estate outside the Carolette. She arrived early with her team, carrying a sample books, crates of greenery, and structured arrangements in soft cream and gold. She looked elegant now in a simple fitted dress with her hair pinned back neatly, not flashy, not wealthy in a show way, but composed, graceful, and successful through her own effort. As she crossed the main hall with floral notes in hand, she suddenly stopped. Trenton stood near the staircase speaking with a sponsor. He turned, saw her, and froze. For a moment, neither moved. He noticed immediately that she had changed, not just in clothing or posture, in pressure. She no longer looked like the uncertain young wife who waited for his approval. She looked like a woman who had lived through grief and turned it into strength. Maren's life feeling was not anger, it was distance. She had crossed too much life to feel broken by his face anymore. Trenton ended his conversation quickly and approached her. Maren, she answered calmly. Good evening. His eyes moved across the hall setup. This is your work? Yes. He looked around, clearly realizing her success was bigger than rumor. You built all this with time, she said, and necessity. He swallowed for the first time in years. He looked like a man searching for words he should have spoken long ago. You look well, he said. Maren did not smile. I am. Then he asked the one question he had no right to ask with surprise. How did you do it? She looked directly at him and answered with a quick strength. I loved the child you rejected. Then I worked. That sentence struck him harder than any public insult could have. He glanced away first. In that moment, Trenton understood that the woman he abandoned had become everything he failed to respect. Fate brings him lower. The months after that gala were cruel to Trenton than anything before. One final business collapse tied to debt, exposure, and failed private development plan pushed him into a severe financial crisis. Family protection could no longer cover everything. Properties were sold, assets were divided, his mother's influence weakened, his father exhausted and embarrassed by repeated mistakes. With due direct support beyond the minimum needed to prevent public disaster, Trenton was not left starving in the street, but for a man born into power he had fallen painfully close to ordinary financial struggle. He downsized to be a small townhouse rental and lost the polished life he once treated as permanent. Invitations stopped. The people who once laughed at his jokes moved on. Wealthy friends avoided his calls. Women who once admired his name no longer saw value in what remained. And at the center of all that loss lived a truth he could not escape. He had abandoned his wife and daughter for the ugliest reason a father could carry. Not because they wronged him, because his pride rejected what life gave him. That shame followed him everywhere. The daughter he did not deserve. One spring afternoon when Eloman was almost 5, Trenton requested a surprise visit in the garden courtyard outside Maren's studio. By then the legal arrangements allowed limited contact. Though he had never earned a close place in the child's heart, Maren agreed because she never wanted bitterness to shape her daughter's future. Aloman arrived in a pale yellow dress and a ribbon in her hair, holding a tiny basket of petals, and she had insisted on bringing. She was soft-spoken, observant, and sweet in a way that made adults lower their voices naturally around her. Trenton looked at her and something inside him twisted. She was beautiful, not in the shallow way his old world mired beauty. She carried light. She reminded him of everything he had thrown away before even understanding it. Eloman looked at him politely and said, "Hello." He crouched to her level. "Hello, Eloman." She held out the basket. These are for the tables." He took it carefully, almost as if he did not deserve to touch it. Maren watched from a short distance away. The visit was quick. Eloman showed him how she sorted petals by shade. She told him which flowers meant kindness and which meant new beginnings, because Maren had taught her the language of blooms. Trenton listened with an expression Maren had never seen on him before. Regret without defense. When the visit ended, Eloman ran back, regret without defense. When the visit ended, Eleanor ran back to Marian and took her hand. Then she turned and gave Trenton a small wave. Such a simple gesture, but it broke him more than anger would have, because children offer innocence, even when adults do not deserve it. After Eleanor went inside, Trenton remained standing near the path while Marian faced him calmly. "She extraordinary," he said, voice low. "Yes," Marian replied, "she always was." He looked down. "I was wrong." "That is true. I lost everything that mattered." Marian said nothing for a moment. Then she answered in a tone free from cruelty. "No, you threw it away before you understood its value." He closed his eyes briefly as if the sentence hurt because it was exact. That was fate's deepest answer to him. Not poverty alone, clarity. The lesson at the end. Years later, Marian's business expanded into event design boutique, floral collections, and training programs for single mothers wanting creative work. She built not only a career but a life of meaning. Her studio became a place where women learned skills, earned income, and found encouragement. Eleanor grew up surrounded by beauty, honesty, and the knowledge that her worth had never depended on being born a baby. That was Marian's greatest victory. She did not spend her years seeking revenge. She spent them building something better. And that is often the strongest response to betrayal. Trenton remained a cautionary figure in local business memory. He recovered some stability over time, but never his old pride. Never the full trust of those around him, and never the family life he once had in his hands. He learned too late that legacy is not secured by sons, names, land, or pride. Legacy is shaped by the character, and character had failed him when it mattered most. Marian sometimes looked at Eleanor playing in the studio garden and felt a quiet gratitude that life had not ended. Where heartbreak began, it had only changed direction. She had once thought being left meant she was ruined. Instead, it became the road that revealed her strength. So this was the story of Marian Cole, a poor girl who believed a rich man's promise of love, married him, and gave him a child with all of the hope in her heart. But when that child was a daughter instead of the son he wanted, he left her in pain and walked away from his own family. Yet life did not stay unfair forever. The same woman he rejected rose through courage, work, and motherhood. The same daughter he failed to value became the lights of a beautiful life. And the same proud man who mired family through selfish expectation was brought painfully close to losing everything. The moral of the story is clear. A child is never disappointment. Only a small heart can think that way. A daughter is not less than a son. Love that depends on gender, status, or pride is not real love at all. And a man who abandons his family for selfish reasons may keep money for a while, but he loses something far greater than wealth. He loses honor. The deeper lesson is this: never let rejection define your value. Sometimes the person who leaves you in only making room for the stronger life you are meant to build. Pain can wound you, but it can also wake your power. And the child someone else failed to cherish may become the very blessing that gives your whole life meaning. Thank you.